again, I'm not a parent, but I absolutely know that there are many aspects of parenting that are uncomfortable. To just eliminate the sex piece of the pie is weird to me.
Welcome back to Muse on the Mic. I'm Riley.
I'm Emily. Thanks again, guys, for joining us on another awesome episode of Muse on the Mic. Thanks for tuning in. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit that little button right now. As we're growing and it's making us really happy, make sure you head over to Patreon and subscribe there too. It's $9 a month, double the episodes, all of the uncensored content, the too hot for YouTube content, all of the above is over on the Patreon, plus something fun and special on Sunday nights for you, and season 1 and 2 to catch up on of all the Patreon episodes over there. So it's binge worthy. I'm so excited about that part. What are we doing today, Riley? Fill everybody in.
Well, surprise, surprise, we're doing another conversation about sex. But this one, we're going to react to a clip we saw on The View. It talks a lot about parenting, sex education. And so we're going to watch it with you guys and have a bit of conversation.
I love this. I love The View. Big fan. I love the diversity of opinions. And they really dig into like how, when they were being raised, did conversations about sex come up? And while some of them are raising kids now, and it's always interesting to hear like what goes on in people's homes, right? And there's a plethora of opinions. Some I agree with, some I don't, obviously. Given our position in our careers, we definitely disagree or agree with some of it on purpose. But I'd love to see in the comments a little bit of discussion. Let's hear from you guys, the viewers, too, on how were you raised about this? Is it something that was open conversation? Was it too taboo to even like breathe about? Was there somewhere in the middle? Like I'm very curious because what I knew as my normal was normal, right? So let's see what everyone else's normal is. Let's watch and we'll hop back on the other side.
All right, welcome back. This is so important. So for a lot of parents, topics about sexuality and relationships are kept behind closed doors. But actress Lisa Rinna says in a new podcast interview that she's glad she was open about it while raising her 2 daughters. Take a look.
Do you ever worry that putting out your sensual side would put you in a box?
You don't really think about it when you're doing it and you think, oh, my kids are going to see this. Oh, the kids are going to like know about this. And I think what it's done for them, it's given them a sense of freedom because I watch Amelia and I watch how she's gone through the modeling world and how she is fearless and her sexuality, she's very free. And I think it's gorgeous. I think that if I helped in any way so that they didn't feel shame, then that was a good thing.
What do you think?
Okay, I'm no Lisa Rinna, but my parents raised us in the church and they were very like, sex, don't have it. If you do, you'll probably burn in hell. Make sure you're married, like all the things. So we didn't talk a lot about our bodies, and my mom was a nurse too. So like both things are there. I would hope going forward that I raise my kids slightly differently. We're still in the church, but I go straight to science and biology on sex and our bodies and not feeling shamed about them, knowing that we were literally, evolution is to have urges like that. We're supposed to procreate. We're supposed to, I want them to have a healthy idea and be responsible. And I also want them to feel comfortable to talk to me. I would never talk to my parents about that.
I wish I was as evolved as you because I don't ever want to know that my mom had sex and I have been married for 4 years and I don't want her to know that I have sex with my husband. And I'd like to live in that mystery with each other.
No, you just told her.
I'm still waiting.
He just ran in second base.
Why? I grew up in a family where for some reason it makes me so deeply uncomfortable. I can talk with girlfriends about it, but there is a...
I don't know. It's less about shame than it is about dignity for me. I just think that there are certain things that are private. I think my husband and I model affection, of course. Not model affection, but model what a healthy relationship looks like. But like talking about sex with my kids is not really my jam.
I don't want to talk about my sex. I want to talk about sex.
Yeah,
just to be clear.
I will answer any questions that they have. And
but
honestly,
she's talking about peering and things.
Yeah, being sexual in front of them.
in the movies. And
Yeah, that's not my
At this
jam.
point, there's a certain age where nobody wants to see your boobs anymore.
Although Lisa Rinna's a fan.
Not even, wait a second, not even my husband, all right? So let's call it what it is. Exhibitionism.
I'm sorry. It's important for kids to know that sex is not dirty and filthy.
Yeah. Unless you're
that
doing
there's
it right.
nothing. No.
Took me a minute.
Yeah. But if you're not going to have the conversation with them, then you have to let somebody, like school or a teacher or somebody,
their friends
talk to them about how this works, because you should not be wondering where you came from and how you got here. And you should not think that there's anything wrong with what you got. We all got it.
Yeah.
We all have it. So this was how I was raised. My mom was a nurse too, and she said, I will not have you not understanding how this works.
She should have talked to my mom.
She should have. She should have. But you know what? Talk to your own kids. Somebody's got to tell them it might as well be you. It's cheaper. We'll be right back.
Well, I mean, there really is a lot of different opinions. And like you said before watching the clip, I think it depends on kind of your culture, your religion, how you were raised. But listen, at the end of the day, your kids are going to learn about sex from someone. So who better for that to be than yourself? I think it's better than them going out into the world and educating themselves with their peers, right?
Peers, online, social media, special websites. I mean, it's not hard to put in a fake birthday to get through that age confirmation on Pornhub, right?
Yeah.
Those things have always boggled me because, like, really? And then we can all do the Capacha thing after and pick how many bicycles we see. Like, that's not hard. Is it really protecting the world from all the, like, the bad things? But you know what? I feel like over the past few years specifically, there's been this heightened, ever since Panorama, really, there's been this heightened focus on what's being taught in schools and how much control parents have, right? And how much say they have, what they want their kids like kind of fed or indoctrinated with. Some things are a little too liberal for people. Some things are a little too conservative for people. There should always be the separation of religion and schooling and all those things. And it's getting very blurred and messy these days. And I think to myself, when I think of this topic, if you are of that sector of parents, it's hyper concerned, very, very concerned about what's being taught in school. Would you not want to be the one then who teaches your kid about sex? Because you're already untrusting of the curriculum and of the teachers and of the school boards or whatever, and however far it goes, right? At the same time, school boards have a curriculum based on research and years of experience, and those things are put together to create something that is proper, age appropriate, and in the right packaging, right? Like what comes in a workbook? What is a coloring thing? What is a go split into groups and act something out? Like there's different ways of learning, what requires an essay, what's going to be on the quiz, all of those kinds of elements. Unless you're literally homeschooling, in which case you're given curriculum, which is still coming from the school board.
Right.
Like, how much say do you have on what goes in sex ed class? Well, then you have to be a really involved parent, going to all the PTA meetings, getting involved with the school board stuff. And that includes a lot of extra work as a parent, right? It's time spent, and it's definitely a bunch of emails to a lot of people, superintendents and principals and what have you. So if you want that kind of control, you should talk about it at home. And yet most of the people, not all, but most people that want that kind of hyper control are conservatives. And you can see from the few conservative voices on there that they're not comfortable talking about sex at all. So like, this seems ass backwards to me, because if you want the control, then you have to have the conversation, because otherwise you're almost forcing that void of information and making it bigger. And then it's going to be that much more exciting when some stupid kid on the playground says something about a BJ and they come home going, Mom, what is... They don't like what you say, and they're like, suck a dick. Like, you need to know where this is coming from so that they can interpret it properly. If you haven't even armed yourself, even in preparation to breach the subject, let alone how to talk about it. How are you going to get to this point where your kid is like, I know all about this. I'm good. You guys do whatever you need to do. Right. Like it just seems so backwards to me, as does a lot of things that I find a little bit hypocritical in politics, and therefore a little extension of religion too. Right. Because it's all kind of intermixed. So I found that a little confusing. And yet the glaring difference between the conservative side of the table carrying a whole whack of shame and then Whoopi kind of leading onwards into the more liberal side of things is very much like, talk about it. Just freaking talk about it. Like, stop making it weird. Just talk about it. And like, there's biology, there's your own experience, there's pop trends and different language you can use, and like all these different things you can pull from to make it comfy. But for God's sake, just talk about it.
I agree. And I mean, I think sex education in the home needs to happen, but not even just the basics. Like, okay, we understand penis goes in vagina and we can make babies, but do your children know that sex takes place for pleasure as well? Do they understand what oral is? I mean, there's a lot of different things you can go through. And it's funny because when I was watching that clip, I thought of, I want to say the movie was The Vacation, where I'll have to send you the clip because I'm sure you haven't seen it. But this boy says to his dad, "What's a rim job?" And his dad looks super uncomfortable. He's like, "That's when you like open mouth kiss." And so he didn't want to have that conversation, which I get is uncomfortable. But you dive in, guys, because so then this boy goes to a girl as he leaned in for a kiss. And he goes, "I just was hoping to have a rim job or to get a rim job." And she freaked out because clearly her parents told her what that is, or she knew. That it's the proper language, what these acts are. And don't get me wrong, when your 12-year-old or 11-year-old asks what a blowjob is, I get it. And I'm pretty open-minded. But I think it starts within the home. And if they don't trust their parents to give them the accurate information, who are they to trust?
100%. You just threw me back to my old childhood because I gave my first BJ at 11.
Right.
Just throw that out there to all the people all over YouTube. And yet I don't think I was definitely the first in my friend group. I wasn't the first in my grade. I do remember that was a time where everybody knew everything about everybody, right? So I was an early bloomer, but not the first, that's for sure. But I remember how I found out about it. And it's funny because notoriously, I've talked about this so many times on the pods, I was raised by parents who were hyper Catholic, conservative in that mindset, and yet very liberal about sex and anything that would be deemed kind of progressive now, like your sexuality and your orientation, and like any of those kind of things were open conversation. I joke that I was raised by the Fockers. If you haven't seen Meet the Fockers, you must. It's one of the best movies ever. And ironically, BJ's never came up. Oral sex of any kind never came up in the conversations. And I was talking to an older boy who was a friend of a friend that I did figure skating with. And he was 14 or 15 at that time. And he started dirty talking to me on the phone. And I was like, I'm 11. It was my first everything. I was nervous. I was wet. I was excited, all things. And he kept talking about these BJs. And at the time, I kept a diary. And I remember literally writing the exact sentence, "But I don't know about these blowjobs he keeps talking about. What is that? Do I blow on it?" And I know that line because my mom, she fucking read my diary, which she had no business doing. I never really confronted her on that. You can hear in my voice that I've got a bit of built up angst, but she did. And then she came to me to talk about it, about how that was inappropriate. And it wasn't with the tone of that's inappropriate to do or to talk about with a boy. It was that's inappropriate to put in a diary. It's like, okay.
Wow.
So I never put sex stuff in my diary after that because I thought that's not the place for that kind of confessional. You could talk about everything else, but that wasn't the place for that. So I didn't make a separate sex diary, or maybe I should have, but in general, I eliminated from my mother a resource of information is what I did. Kept reading in silence and then had proper conversations with me instead of this confrontational thing that made me just, okay, you don't have access to that info. Fast forward about a month or two, and I ended up going to the movies with this boy. And that's where the first BJ happened. And I remember at school telling all my friends about it. And of course, then they tell their friends and the boys find out and everybody knows. And it was like this big thing. But then the next like 4 sleepover parties that we had, or like slumber parties with my girlfriends, they were like, you got to teach us. And so we're getting like beer bottles and bananas and anything we could find. I'm teaching people how to suck a dick. I mean, I was 11.
Right.
It was madness. And by the way, it happened in a movie theater with the boy, and we got caught by the attendant with the fucking light.
Oh my God.
Terrible. And I'll never forget it. But in hindsight, like that was my introduction, even in a liberal family that was clearly open to talk about intimacy. And so you're right. You have to get down to almost specifics. You don't have to talk about the BJs you've given. I would tell this story to, if I had children, I would be like, oh, you're almost 11. You're almost 10 now. But and I also wouldn't do the opposite. I wouldn't be like, you have to wait till you're 18. Like I wouldn't do that. But I would hate to leave them where some older guy was like, oh, you know what all the good girls do?
Right.
He was a bad boy. He was a bad boy. Like he, not just in that sense, but like when you talk about like bad boys, he was. And of course he knew about all these things at 14 because he had been with many girls. He was for the streets. And so it left this giant gap. And yet, even though my mother told me not to write things in my diary like that or whatever, I never felt shame about doing it. Even now I'm laughing telling that story. I wasn't like, oh my God, I'm so embarrassed. I can't believe I did that at such a young age. I was curious. What the hell? He was really cute. It was exciting. That's why I did it. Full stop. There's nothing more deeper than that, right? But had I known, then maybe I would have decided not to do it. Maybe I would have decided I totally want to do it. Let's push our date up a little bit. Like it is like, let's figure it out and navigate it. So hearing like the conservative side with the shame thing, especially the girl right on the end is Alyssa, the one who said she doesn't even want her parents to know that she's had sex, even though she's married. That makes me sad to hear, but yet happy I never received that kind of shame like at home. But to hear people talk like that, I'm like, that's a really sad and long way to live, thinking that just all sex in general is just terrible. Like she was born somehow. Her parents aren't stupid. Let's be grandma had sex, great grandma had sex, right? Like they all had to in order for us to be here. So let's not be ignorant about it. And would you shame your grandmother? Like let's talk about it more realistically and help eliminate that shame instead of this girl Alyssa I know wants in the future to have kids. She's going to be like that as a mom. And so her kids are going to grow up thinking, oh my God, this is dirty. This is terrible. We don't talk about it. We don't even admit that it happened. That's extreme to me.
Oh, no. How to kiss the homie without it being gay.
Why are you still here?
I wasn't. I'm not here. I wasn't here the whole time. I was working out, and that's why I have a weight with me. So I was working out and fucking listening to just videos and stuff, and then you popped up, and I was like, what were they talking about? I thought I heard something about somebody kissing. I was like, what? I said, what the freaking heck is that about? And then you popped up, and I was like, weird. So I wasn't doing it. And okay, sure. And you know what? Yeah, all right, fine. I watched it. Okay, sure. I wanted to know what it's like to kiss a homie without being gay. Just one fucking time, all right?
No.
I swear that is secretly all men.
You think?
I think, okay, maybe not all, but like 95% have little snippets of gay curiosity at the very least. That's why they do half of what they do. Because why is it always about your penis?
This dildo is the perfect family Christmas gift. Great for sharing around the Christmas dinner table. It's long, it's hard, it's crispy. Sounds like a bit of a condition. It's moist, and its size makes it perfect for sharing. Forget the gift of love this Christmas. Give your family the perfect dildo. Slight disclaimer, I cannot be held responsible for any family breakdowns. And just a disclaimer, I'm talking about bread here, nothing else.
Right. Love her.
It's beautiful. It is beautiful. It's it all belonged to my grandmother, my late grandmother. She just passed. Oh, I'm so sorry for your loss. I appreciate it. I remember opening Christmas presents in it. It's so sweet. So what is this? Is this going in the living room or? Actually, it's gonna be in the bedroom. It's gonna be in our bedroom.
You're craving something a little extra, aren't you? Subscribe to our Patreon and enjoy the ride.
That shame, I mean, that you mentioned, and I think it's modeling by example in a home. If a child is lucky enough to grow up with both mom and dad in the home, or stepmom and dad, that they see that dynamic, instead of being like, oh, the kids are watching. Oh, don't let the kids see.
Right.
Let the kids see. I'm not saying penetration, but like, let the kids see what intimacy looks like, what a relationship looks like, what a healthy sexual relationship looks like. And I told you this story of my mother and my stepfather, that when he would come home from work, they wouldn't just, how was your day? They would kiss for like a good minute or two. And me and my stepbrother were always like, oh God, mom and dad again. But you know what? It showed me that's, for them, that's passion. They love each other and they show it, and they're not ashamed for us to see it. Why would they be? It's a kiss, for God's sakes. But I think so often parents have that shame and don't want the kids to see certain things. And again, then we're just carrying this stigma of it's taboo. We don't talk about it. We don't show this in front of people. And it just gets carried generationally.
That's a tough one. Put that and cinnamon together and I'm screwed. You know what? The one that like surprised me a little bit, actually, like I know Alyssa, the girl who doesn't want to talk that it exists, is very conservative. She's the Republican on the panel. But the woman beside her with the curly hair, Sunny Hostin, who is my ear piercing inspo, by the way. She is very funky, a woman. She's very trend setting. She's very like with the pop culture. Her TikTok is lit. Like she's all up in it. She's got children that are around 20, 21, 22, 18, something in that range, like going off to college age. And so you'd think that she'd be a little hipper. That sounds like such a boomer word to use, but like she'd be a little hipper when it comes to the like diggity stuff, that she'd be like comfortable. And to hear her say that it's like, it's just not proper, it's not like ladylike, it's not this and that, I was like, that's funny, because I watch The View every day, and this is a woman who openly talks about plastic surgery she's had, crushes she's had on men, experiences with her husband, like necessarily getting into their sex life in general, but she's just very open about things that other people might be like, you never ask a woman her age, or you never ask if someone's had a boob job or had their nose done, or like, who's your Botox girl? Like, she's the one that's got a pen and paper being like, tell me, because I'm going to book an appointment. Like, she's all up in that stuff. And I was kind of shocked because she's beautiful. Her husband is gorgeous. He's a doctor or a lawyer. No, he's a doctor. So like, they've got a fanciful, sexy life. There's no reason that woman should feel uncomfortable to be like, hubby and I have done it before. And my children are of age where either they have or they will soon take on a lover or two. Like they're at that age perfectly. And maybe even a few years prior. And I get that she did say, like, if they come ask a question, I'll answer it. But my God, it takes a lot for a kid to build the balls, sometimes to even ask to go out to play, let alone like, hey, mom, what does it mean when someone says they want to rim you? Like, that's a big question. I know grown adults that wouldn't ask their mother that.
I think it boils down to, and this is just my opinion as a parent, but I think it boils down to how open you are as a household. And that could be on so many different topics, because I don't know if it's just my kids' age, but they ask all the things and they are not afraid to ask. And like I said, it's not always fun to answer. And sometimes I need to take a deep breath or a sip of wine, whatever helps. But it's better to give it. And I think there's so many people that are so deeply uncomfortable by speaking about sex. But as a parent, it's literally your job. Like, it actually is. It's education, and your body, your relationships, you're going to go into a marriage. These are all things that dictate years of your life. Why are you not educating your children about it? Like, it makes no sense, but I get that discomfort is just passed down and passed down. And I think the more conversations The View has, we have, that people speak about it, hopefully the better it becomes.
Definitely. It needs to be normalized. That whole shame thing and the stigma behind it needs to go. And yet, kudos to you, because yes, from what I know of your children, when I've spent time with them, they're very blunt and they're very open and they're fearless. But that's a reflection of you. And I think that's fantastic. That's how it should be. Whether they're asking about money, when they're asking like, who's that guy who's like, walking by the house or something, like, it doesn't matter. They'll just spit it out and ask it. But again, I'm not a parent, but I absolutely know that there are many aspects of parenting that are uncomfortable. To the sex piece of the pie is weird to me, because listen, figuring out appropriate punishments is hard. The first time your child falls and breaks a bone is hard. Like, there's so many different elements that would be gut-wrenchingly uncomfortable. I mean, divorces are uncomfortable. Explaining, why grandpa died. Like, there's so many uncomfortable things. Why is it that there's no one who's like, oh, I've never talked to my children. My parents never told me when elders passed away, because that was too uncomfortable for everybody. Like, there's none of that for other kind of topics. And yet, why is it just the sex thing? Like, what is it, people? And you're right, it is generationally passed down. Fuck that word. But why are we carrying on things that are clearly not productive? I mean, there's lots of things that we shed from past generations in terms of behaviors. Again, society, culture, what's trendy, all those kinds of things. And there's some things you pick up from history once in a while. Fashion trends come back in style and so on and so forth. But to continually be going on and on and on with this whole, we don't talk about the naked stuff. We don't talk about the naked stuff. Not even just the naked stuff. We don't talk about the period stuff. We don't talk about probably the pubes and the growing pains and the morning boners and the random school and like all the things that happen that are uncomfortable. What's a wet dream? Where do I come when I masturbate? Like, things. These are comfortable. You're telling me it's not uncomfortable for a mom doing laundry to find the socks? Like, come on. Why are we eliminating like the human part of it? It's just so strange to me. And then you're sending your kids out into the world, into that vacuum, carrying potentially a bit of shame with it. And if they're feeling shame about it, are they then ever going to come to you? And what worries me, like my ovaries feel it, because I'm like, what if something sexually bad happens to that child? Because if they're not comfortable to ask it in a funny way, or they just heard a quip in a movie and been like, Dad, what does that mean? Or, whatever. How are they going to come to you and say, Mr. Wilson next door touched me? Or, something happened and a boy foisted himself on me? Or anything that could happen that could be bad if your child's in a vulnerable sector or situation. It could happen to all of us as adults in any situation. Walk down the street.
Maybe they don't, because if sex just isn't a conversation that's had in the home, I would imagine they probably wouldn't. They'd go tell their best girlfriend, or they'd tell someone else, or they'd put it in their diary. But I think back to my parents, it was like there's sex, politics, and money. And my mom was pretty open with talking about sex, but I remember lessons from my father that I don't even think he shared with me politically how he would vote. That was very private to him. How much he made was very private to him. Now he's loosened up over the years, but I think those are important pieces, just like sex. I think kids should know about money, or how parents struggle, or how they budget so that they can put them in the things that they want. These are all conversations that shape children into teenagers, into adults, that are important, instead of just letting them, like you said, find out on their own.
100%. Again, as liberal as my folks were, I would have been probably beaten and grounded if I dared ask what their salary was, or like, how much did our house cost? Or like, even if it was for like a school project and they're like, go around your neighborhood and figure out what a property market value is. Like, my parents would have been like, we do not discuss that. It would have been very stern and very final. I remember the first time I figured out, or they told me how they voted in an election, I was probably around 16 years old, because I was bummed that I couldn't vote. And it was the first time I was actually interested. It's funny because I never knew my parents' personal politics, but my dad and an uncle loved to talk and kind of banter, not quite bicker, but like debate politics back and forth. They get in these heated discussions. And it was almost like when they get too like hardcore into the sports talk, and the wives would be like, "You want to go get some wine in the kitchen?"
Right.
As soon as they started talking politics, we knew the night was about to separate, and the boys were going to do their thing, and the ladies were going to go drink. Like that was the way it was, and I witnessed that all the time. And so I'd hear about politics all the time. It always interested me, but it was like earshot type stuff. I didn't get interested in it until I could participate. And part of that was stuff learning in school. We were starting to learn politics in high school and like what a party was and how the system works and blah, blah, blah. So I was like, do I get to vote? My dad was like, no, but we do. And here's what we did. Right. And so I was like, oh, okay, now I know. And at times they've jumped back and forth depending on local elections, federal elections, etc. And yet sex was kind of open in some circumstances. Them being physically intimate and like joking or talking about sex, movies, all that stuff was very liberal. And yet we weren't allowed to watch like Married with Children. We weren't allowed to watch a sex scene in a movie. They'd cover our eyes and be like, wait till it's over. Like there was like hypocriticalness involved in what I consider my liberal upbringing. The conservatism always kind of fought its way back in. And I blame that again on cultural upbringing, part European, part Caribbean, part French Canadian. There's a lot of strict Catholicism in that mix. And then my mom being a Catholic principal, it was just like that stuff kept creeping in. And yet now they are hyper liberal in terms of maybe not how they vote, but how they discuss all the things. Like there's no topic. I could sit and bring up rimming in a conversation and they'd like giggle because they know what it is. Remember the first time I played Cards Against Humanity with my family and had to explain what a queef was to my mother. I have that on tape. It was the funniest conversation I've ever seen in my life. And I'll never forget it as long as I live. And I was like, how are you a 70s baby and you don't know words like queefing? Like when did you miss that bus? Because y'all been on every other bus. Yeah. How did this happen? So it's confusing, and yet I like that I was given that. If I had decided to become a mom, I would super raise my kids to maybe not be politically liberal because I wouldn't want to indoctrinate them that way, but to be liberal in their speech, to be like free in their ability to express or to question or to wonder or to want. Like, if we don't have the answer, let's go to the library and get the book. And I'm big on libraries, so I would take them to the library because let's actually quest for information. Yes, you can Google, but let's learn. Let's learn together. If you want to talk about what's a period, let's go get a book and let's sit with it and I'll explain and help some things and we'll figure it out. Like, I wouldn't want to put that shame stuff on them. I feel like, given what we do for a living, I'd be a hypocrite if I was like, oh, we can't talk about that here. And yet on a podcast, I'm like, talk to your kids. That would be crazy, right? But it's interesting hearing other people's opinions and hearing kind of their take. I keep in mind, there's different ages of all these ladies on The View too, right? Like Whoopi's almost 70. I think she's 68 or something like that now. And Alyssa's in her young 30s. So there's a lot of different generations in that mix and areas of the country they grew up in and backgrounds and ethnicities and all those things and all those pieces play in. So I thought it was interesting when I saw it, and I thought, let's talk about that on the pod. Let's see what other people think about it or how they were raised. I'm positive the comment section will be filled with disclaimers like I'm of the 60s generation or I was raised in Italy or, you know, blah, blah, blah. And it'll have all these like particulars. But that's the meat of the information that I kind of want to see and learn about, because how does that vary if it's 6 generations all in Italy or, you know, 20 different ages of people, but spread out across America? Like, I really want to know how that all pieces together for people and how they feel about it in hindsight. I love that they asked, how were you raised and how are you raising your children? Because it shows that pass of the baton in like real time. And I thought that was super cool.
Yeah, it is. I really enjoyed that segment. I think it's just a great conversation to open. And I don't judge. I don't think my home or anyone's home is the perfect home. To each their own. I respect, you know, everyone's opinions, but it's interesting to kind of figure out how did they get to that place. And I think that's what this segment really opened us up to.
Absolutely. And if there's any way, I think, for people to tear down a bit of shame that they're carrying, you don't necessarily have to see a sex worker, although I recommend it. have a conversation with one. They'll help enlighten you on a few things. And if there's one thing where I think our industry as a whole is really good at, it's tearing down those kind of stigmas. And so we could probably list 900 reasons on why you shouldn't carry shame at all for being a sexual being. That to me is biology 101. It's God-given 101. It's all those things at the very most basic level. And so even if it just means you take 10% of your shame away, that might completely change your life and therefore change your kid's life. And ideally, I would think, lead them to sexually healthy relationships. I think that's all anyone would want, whether it's a first boyfriend, a new husband, a one-night stand. You want it to be healthy and happy and autonomous and of choice, right? Consent. So yeah, let's keep shattering that stigma. Don't be shameful for being a sexual creature. And yet, let's get uncomfortable to get comfortable. Let's talk about it.
Well said, Em.
Yay. Well, thanks guys for joining us in this awesome convo. Make sure you do drop in those comments and tell us your story. Maybe we'll read it on an upcoming episode as a follow-up. Or maybe a little surprise on a Sunday with a little extras about people's stories. Who knows? We'll surprise you. Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.